presenters this afternoon, I'm sure, are well known to many of you. We have Len Wilson and Dennis Davidson. Now, I've had the honour of hosting these two gentlemen over the past quite a few years now, I think. And I just find the topics that they present just absolutely fascinating. I've learned so much about ships and design and building and sailing, but most of all, sailors and their family lives, the social history, which you pepper your talks with. I find that absolutely really interesting. Now, the speakers, well, Len, he was brought up in Stromness, where the sound of the lifeboat maroons in the middle of the night couldn't be ignored. There was one for the rocket brigade and a second at about a minute interval for the lifeboat. Not much sleeping after that, he says. He spent several years as a radio officer in the Merchant Navy, where safety at sea was a major part of the job. Dennis was born and brought up in Stromness before attending university to study naval architecture. He then worked in the design office at McGrew & Co. They were yacht builders on the Clyde, and he worked there for 20 years. He later became a partner in Murray Cormack Associates, concentrating on the design of pilot boats, passenger vessels, and specialised crafts such as Polar Bound, an Arctic exploration vessel. The company now trades as Murray Cormack Design. Research in Orkney's traditional boats and their history, that's been a long-term project for Dennis. Now today, through storm and darkness, the lifeboats have answered the maroons for 200 years. Dennis and Len are going to look back to the earliest designs and the seagoing disasters that led to the RNLI's founding. They describe the establishment of the Orkney stations, the men who crewed the boats, and some of the hazardous and daring service they provided. Gentlemen, over to you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Throughout the 18th century, many sailing ships intent on crossing the Atlantic from the east coast ports of Britain made their way north about to avoid French privateers in the Channel. Initially, ships chose to sail around the north of Orkney, as shown by the solid red arrows, but with only sketchy charts and no lighthouses, shipwrecks occurred with an alarming regularity, especially on the islands of North Ronaldsay and Sandy. Later, when Mackenzie's charts became available, ships attempted the shorter, tide-driven passage to the Pentland Firth, shown by the striped red arrow. But many had to shelter at Long Hope or Stromness to await a favourable wind, while others were still being shipwrecked. Small open boats of various types and sizes were used to attend vessels in distress to rescue survivors, but this was only possible when the sea conditions were suitable for the boats and the crews to survive. In 1740, when the Swedish East India ship Sverige was stranded and later broke up on the Reef Dyke, a submerged reef near North Ronaldsay, some of the survivors who landed on the Fair Isle claimed, quote, "Our friends who drowned for want of help from the barbarous savages, the Orkney men of North Ronaldsay," unquote. Similar language was often used to describe the actions of islanders when shipwrecks occurred, accusing them of being more intent on stealing goods washed ashore than rescuing the shipwrecked mariners. With the storm raging for days, large seas would have been breaking on the beaches of North Ronaldsay, and any attempt to launch a small open boat in such conditions would have been a huge risk to the boatmen and the small boats, which were likely to be swamped and pounded to pieces on the beach. And this actually happened with the longboat from the Sverige when it landed on Fair Isle. The problem of rescuing survivors from shipwrecks in adverse weather was first addressed by Lionel Lucan, a coach builder in London, who patented his idea in 1785 for an unsinkable boat with flotation chambers and cork belting around the sides. In 1789, the Law House Committee of South Shields near Newcastle advertised a competition for the best design of lifeboat carrying 24 persons. The winner was to receive a reward of 2 guineas. Only 2 designs were received. William Wooltave of South Shields in Northumberland produced a model of a boat in copper with a sprightly sheer and sealed end chambers. He claimed the boat would self-right if capsized. Another model which did not self-right was submitted by Henry Greathead, a boat builder in South Shields. After the committee had considered the 2 proposals, they decided that neither design met the brief. Wooltave was given 1 guinea, which he rejected, while Greathead was awarded a contract to build the committee's own design of boat, which was based on the 2 designs submitted. Greathead made 1 change to the design, requesting the keel be rockered or curved upwards at the ends, as shown in this next slide. This banana-shaped hull, with high bow and stern, was to enable launching from a beach into large breaking waves and surf. The bows on other beach boats, such as the North Ronaldsay Pram and the Irish Curragh, are similarly shaped. The boat was double-ended, which then meant they didn't require to turn the boat in heavy seas. They could go either ahead or astern. And the rocker keel made the boat much more manoeuvrable. The first lifeboat built by Greathead to the new design was called the Original and went into service in 1790 and, quote, scarce shipped any water, unquote, while rescuing the crew of a stricken ship at Shields in heavy seas. The boat measured 28 feet long by 9 foot 4 broad and could carry 20 persons, including a crew of 12. In 1797, the demands from ships in distress in the Northumberland coast were such that a second boat was required to serve at North Shields. The new boats, slightly longer and broader than the prototype, had her bottom sheathed with copper and was built by Greathead with funding provided by the Duke of Northumberland. Boat number 11, named Zetland, was built by Greathead for use at Redcar in Northumberland and served as a lifeboat from 1802 till 1864. Latterly, this boat was operated by the RNLI, in fact. Remarkably, the boat still survives in a museum in Redcar and is the oldest lifeboat in Britain. In all, Mr. Greathead built 31 lifeboats, mainly for ports along the northeast coast of England, where they were most popular. The lifeboat built for Lowestoft, however, was rejected by the local beachmen, as they reckoned it was unsafe for the seas on their coast. A few of Greathead's lifeboats were also operated at ports on the east coast of Scotland, as far north as Fraserburgh. Greathead sought recognition as inventor of the lifeboat, with mixed results, though he later received a payment of £1,200 from a committee in Parliament. There were about 1,800 ships wrecked around Britain's coast each year at the beginning of the 19th century, with a great loss of life. And in 1823, Sir William Hillary published a pamphlet detailing the plans for a national lifeboat service manned by trained crews. While the Admiralty was not impressed with the idea, support was forthcoming from some politicians, as well as the King, and what later became the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or RNLI, was born in 1824, 200 years ago. This slide shows the 21-foot open cobble used by Grace Darling and her father to rescue sailors off the Forfarshire in heavy seas after the ship was wrecked on the Farne Islands off Northumberland in 1838. Newspaper reports resulted in Grace becoming a national heroine. The cobble survives in a museum at Sea Houses and is clinker built with a high, fine bow, a U-shaped midsection, and raked transom stern. It was a smaller version of the fishing cobbles used by the Northumberland fishermen in the North Sea. The early lifeboats provided by the RNLI to harbours around Britain after 1824 were all double-ended open boats propelled by sails and oars. The first lifeboat station in Orkney was at Stromness, where a 33-foot, 10-oared, self-righting lifeboat named Saltaire was supplied by the RNLI in 1867. The buoyant chambers at the ends of the boat are visible in this slide. There. A boathouse and slip were constructed for storing the boat on the southern shores of the Point of Ness. Launching the lifeboat at low water with heavy seas running in Hoy Sound, however, proved a difficulty, and it took more than an hour during a trial in 1890. So it was later agreed to moor the lifeboat in Stromness harbour. A larger 42-foot lifeboat, propelled by sails and oars, was built in Dumbarton in 1891 to serve at Stromness and named Good Shepherd. The new lifeboat house with slipway was constructed in 1902 amongst the tightly packed houses and piers of Stromness to the north of Gray's Nowst. The RNLI began trials with motors fitted in existing pulling and sailing boats in 1903, and in 1909, 2 new motor lifeboats were provided, one for the station at Stronsay, and the other, the 42-foot John A. Hay, was based at Stromness. No longer dependent on the wind or oars for propulsion, motor lifeboats were able to attempt rescues that were not possible in sailing or pulling boats. When a new 61-foot Barnett-class lifeboat was proposed for Stromness in 1924, the local lifeboat committee said they would prefer a smaller boat that could be stored in the boathouse within the harbour. A proposal for a new 51-foot slipway lifeboat was drawn up by the RNLI's consultant naval architect James Barnett after consulting with the Stromness Lifeboat Committee. As the design for the new boat developed, letters and plans were sent to the local committee for comment. Amongst their requests was the bow have more flare. The stem was raked forward by a foot to achieve this. The boat's sheer was also adjusted and arrangements made for water on deck to quickly clear when driving into heavy head seas, so the boat would lift quicker. While the designer and the Stromness crew favoured twin engines, the chief inspector for the RNLI initially proposed fitting a single engine. But when this was shown to have insufficient power to achieve a speed of 9 knots, it was agreed to fit 2 50-horsepower engines. The inspector then proposed the width of the boat be increased from 13-foot 6 to 14 feet to provide more room around the engines, but eventually it was agreed to retain the narrower hull, which was easier driven. A single tunnel to house the 2 propellers was requested by the Stromness Committee to improve the boat's sailing qualities, but the boat was built with 2 tunnels to maintain propulsion efficiency. The Stromness lifeboat crew also specified where the steering wheel was to be sited. While a cabin was provided below decks for those rescued, the crew, including the helmsman, could only shelter behind open canopies. The blocks, outlined in blue on the drawing, the top there, are flotation cases to provide buoyancy in the event of the hull being breached. While the lifeboat was conceived to be powered by engines and propellers, sails were also carried as a fail-safe and for use on longer voyages. The correspondent also mentions a centreboard being fitted to improve her sailing qualities, but it's unclear if this was fitted, as the drawings of the later boats, which are the ones I've shown you, don't show this feature. Barnett concluded that he believed this design would be an excellent boat for the special conditions at the Stromness district, but a powerful winch would be needed to haul the 25-ton boat up the slipway. While the boat was designed as a slipway boat, it seems the Stromness lifeboat was the only one of her class to be stored in a boathouse, the others all being moored afloat. It is clear from the exchange of letters that this lifeboat design was greatly influenced by the views and comments provided by the Stromness lifeboat crew and committee, led by Secretary George L. Thompson. Hence the reason why the 51-foot Barnett class was also known as the Stromness class. The first 51-foot lifeboat was named JJKSW and arrived in Stromness in 1928 and served until 1955. During this period, 139 lives were saved by the crew of the boat, which cost £13,643 to build. It seems that John Renton Bakey, whose father was boat builder Edward Bakey, prepared a design for the bow of the vessel, and this form may have been used by Barnett when he drew up the hull lines. James Barnett was the senior partner and naval architect with G.L. Watson's in Glasgow and acted as consultant for the RNLI for many years, designing 3 different lifeboats during his term. A steel-built Clyde-class lifeboat was stationed at Kirkwall in 1968. At 70 foot long, this was the largest lifeboat built by the RNLI and was designed by Irish naval architect John Tyrrell. This vessel was named the Grace Patterson Ritchie. 2 Gardner 8L3B engines, each producing 230 horsepower, propelled the vessel at 11 knots. Only 3 of these Clyde-class lifeboats were built. They were intended as cruising vessels which were permanently manned. The steel hull was double-skinned, with 7 watertight bulkheads subdividing the hull, and a fore and aft bulkhead fitted between the 2 engines. But the vessel was not self-righting. In 1970, the RNLI had decided that a fast, seagoing lifeboat was needed, a 50-foot boat that could travel further offshore to rescue people and with a speed of more than 18 knots. They asked G.L. Watson's naval architect at that time, Alan McLaughlin, to produce a similar preliminary design and a round bilge semi-displacement hull with ragged chines or chine strips on the hull was drawn up, then model tested and subsequently altered by the RNLI naval architects. The beam was increased, the chine strips removed, and the spray rails were added. The prototype 52-foot Arran was built of laminated timber and tested at lifeboat stations around Britain. I remember, as a boy, watching with one eye the visiting lifeboat motor out of the harbour while I sat in the dentist's chair at Redroof in Stromness. The local coxswain, Alfie Sinclair, was on board and later sustained bruised ribs when he came against the steering wheel while helming at speed in steep waves. 2 further prototype boats were built with swept-down side decks to assist with recovering vessels from people from the water, and a modified deckhouse design arranged to carry an inflatable boat. More powerful engines were fitted to meet the desired speed, and tunnels provided to protect the larger propellers when operating in shallow water. The last test boat was built with a rounded stern and radius corners to aid handling in following seas. The Arran was self-righting and had a flying bridge to provide improved visibility and communication when working at close quarters. After extensive boat testing, it was decided to produce a hull mould based on the last prototype hull, with an option to revert to the flat transom. The Arran hull was to be constructed of glass reinforced plastic, or GRP, A mould was also produced for the deckhouse, but weight and radio interference problems experienced with the GRP deckhouse led to an aluminium deckhouses being fitted. The first GRP RN number 5404 was launched in 1976. The flat transom was used on boat number 5208 and all boats thereafter. The RN class lifeboats were kept afloat, being too large for the standard lifeboat shed and unsuitable for the slipways. One of the many different lifeboat designs that have been commissioned by the RNLI was the Mersey class, 38-foot Mersey class all-weather lifeboat, which was capable of 17 knots. The lifeboat is smaller than the boats stationed in Orkney. The low profile deckhouse allowed the boat to fit into the standard boathouse and be used as a slipway boat, while the deep bilge keels and tunnels allow the boat to be launched and recovered off a beach using a custom designed carriage. The first Mersey class lifeboat was built in aluminium in 1988, but boats built after 91 were constructed using fiber reinforced composite or FRC, which is stronger and absorbs less moisture and weight than the GRP used for the RNs. The boatyard that built these lifeboats also built the local pilot boat Scapa Pioneer. Lifeboats tend to be crammed with additional features not seen on other boats. Propellers are housed in tunnels to protect them from grounding, and a watertight trunk with hatch is fitted inside over each propeller, so the crew can cut away any ropes that foul the propellers while at sea. Self-closing devices are fitted on all vents, and the auto shutdown of the engines and fans is provided for in the event of a capsize. Any crew thrown into the water are not injured by rotating propellers. The deckhouse volume is designed to allow the boat to self-right, and the house structure, windows, and hatches are all designed to sustain these loadings. Void spaces are often filled with buoyancy cases or nets filled with large ping pong balls to maintain buoyancy if the hull is breached. The RN class lifeboat has now been replaced with the Severn class, which is capable of speeds up to 25 knots. Finally, the RNLI's latest all-weather lifeboat design in service is the Shannon class, which is fitted with water jets instead of propellers and rudders, and is capable of speeds up to 25 knots. This boat is suitable for beach launching and recovery. The hull was designed to reduce motion acceleration and, together with suspension seating, reduce the risk of crews sustaining injuries while traveling at speed to carry out a rescue in rough water. I will now hand over to Len, who will speak more on the lifeboats based on Orkney and some of the rescues carried out.
Hello, can you hear me? You can hear me all right? In the days before the RNLI, it was two local fishermen and seamen round the coast using their own boats, and one of the best publicised rescues was, of course, Grace Darling and her father rescuing the crew of the Forfarshire that Dennis mentioned earlier. I want to come a little closer to home and look at some of the early rescues. And this is the wreck of the Dinnington in 1906. She was going through the Pentland Firth and started her transit in atrocious weather conditions. The skipper realised that he wasn't going to make it, so he headed for the shelter along Hope. But a snow squall impaired their visibility and they grounded in Swither. The ship was spotted from the south walls and the crew of 6 volunteers launched their yawl and rescued 8 of the 10 men. 2 of them had perished before they got there. Our authors described as an incredibly brave rescue. The men were awarded the King's Silver Medal, and there they are wearing their medals. Of course, the North Isles wasn't immune, and we have the wreck of the Peterhead trawler Hope on the Homer ferry. And the ferrymen decided the weather was too bad for a conventional rescue, so they gathered all the rope in the island together to make a long painter, and they paid out the rope to let the boat down and its crew down onto the home and haul themselves back to ferry shore. I don't know how many times they made the trip, but it was hazardous enough to make it come to the attention of Edward VII. He invited them to Balmoral, and they also got the medal. There's a slight difference in the dress here because obviously they were at Balmoral and been to the tailor first. I hear a bit of noise in this coming off this microphone. Is it annoying you? Is that all right? Is that better? Yeah. Is that better now? Can you still hear me? Okay. I want to go back in time a little now to the year 1866 and the wreck of the Albion. This is the wreck that led to the introduction of the RNLI, the Stromness. The Albion was a Western Ocean packet registered in Liverpool and on their way to America loaded with a general cargo that included crockery, tailored cloth, building bricks, and German immigrants headed for the New World. She encountered severe weather and badly damaged her sails and rigging. Looking for shelter and repair, she picked up a pilot as she entered Hoysund, but was with her restricted manoeuvrability, she grounded on the Point of Ree. And I must explain to you, if you read anything about this, it'll say the Point of Oxen. Well, I never heard that term used in games. It's always the Point of Ree. The gamesmen abandoned the New Year's Bar game and launched their boats and went to the rescue. And the paddle steamer Royal Mail, skippered by another Grimsby man, stood by to pick up survivors. And as one of the boats came alongside to transfer the passengers, they all rushed to one side and the boat was swamped. 10 of the occupants were lost, including the man you see here, 25-year-old boatman, Joseph Mode of the Hill. This was the catastrophe that led to the establishment of the first lifeboat station at Stromness the following year. And Joseph's name is inscribed on the memorial at Poole in Dorset. And you saw the boat being launched in Dennis's presentation. Here it is being hauled, and you can see it's a bit struggle of a job to get the boat hauled. And it was an open, exposed boat as well, and she served for 24 years, and the crews had a pretty rough time sometimes, with severe exposure and hard rowing. And one winter call out, she spent a whole snowy night searching up the west coast as far as Bury. The second boat was the Good Shepherd, 42-foot self-righting boat, powered by oar and sail again, and a heavy boat. Bobby Gregg was her coxswain in 1907 when he and his crew performed a very daring rescue from the trawler Shakespeare. The skipper of the Shakespeare made a serious error when he mistook Hoy Low Lighthouse for Dunnet Head, and he turned thinking he was going into the Pentland Firth. Of course, there wasn't many minutes till he grounded at the Point of Spoil and Hoytrund. And Clouston and Breckness galloped into the tune on horseback to raise the alarm. And there is a picture of the Shakespeare. By the time the lifeboat got out there, she was submerged, and the men were up in the rigging. The lifeboat got a line to the men, and 3 of them were saved from the foremast rigging and 1 off the funnel. At the same time, the rocket brigade from Stromness saved 3 more who were hanging onto the mizzenmast. All done on a cush December night in a heavy boat and men pulling on oars. Bobby's awarded a silver medal and his crew got £1 each. They deserved every penny of it, and so did the rocket brigade that day. Can you imagine the skill getting a line on board the mizzenmast? And they did it at their first shot. Here were the first motorboats, the Johnny Hay, in the lifeboat shed. And her crew all lined up there. That's Coxswain Greg on the left. And the successor, Bill Johnson, is third from the left in the front row. And here we have Bobby wearing his silver medal. Obviously, he can't be here with us today, but I think we might have his great-grandson here. I didn't see Jimmy Mason. Is Jimmy here? He's keeping his head down if you see. The first, what you might call a modern lifeboat, was, of course, what Dennis showed you, the JJKSW. Here's a photograph of her. This was taken on her way up to Stromness. I think that's maybe in Lossiemouth or someplace on the way. At her naming ceremony in 1928 was a significant event with Prince George, who would become George VI, doing the honours. And after that, he went out to Long Hop to meet their crew and name their boat. This shows Prince George in the boat with coxswain Bill Johnston. He was better known to us as Bill of the Kirks, the Grimsey man, who had made his home in Stromness. And you'll notice he's wearing the bronze medal, which he got for service on the Johnny Hay when he plucked 2 men off a life raft from a trawler way up the west about Costa Head. And he earned another medal when he and his men rescued the crew of the Carmania ashore in the Kirk Rock in heavy breaking water. It is one of the rare pictures, photographs you'll see of a rescue. Willie Houston was out there with his camera to record the event. And you see she's right in among the breaking water there, and they had an anchor out to hold them, and a line across to the stern of the trawler to get the men off. And they got, I think the anchor gave way when there were still 2 men on board. They jumped into a dinghy, and Bill and his men picked them up. And the trawler skipper's brother actually happened to be in Stromness on another trawler at the time, so he was on shore watching the rescue. And he said of Bill that he deserved a medal as big as a frying pan. With second coxswain Willie Linklater on board, they had a particularly onerous call to Shetland in March 1930. This is the same boat, the JJKSW. When the trawler Bandoran grounded on the Vieskerries, that's about halfway up the west side of Shetland. Shetland boats had made a valiant attempt, but they couldn't get close enough to get a line aboard. And they didn't have a lifeboat until 1933, so Stromness got the call. They were away for 55 hours in atrocious weather conditions. They covered 280 miles and arrived too late to save anybody. It was a tough motor and sail journey in an open boat. They lost the wind in the troughs of the waves, and they slammed full again when they reached the peaks. It was tough. Members of the crew suffered badly from exposure and long, sleepless hours of hazardous duty. They had a repeat performance only 9 days later with Bill Johnson back on the wheel when the Sonava stranded on Musa. That's up the east side of Shetland. The crew of the Sonava landed their passengers safely before the lifeboat arrived. This time, the lifeboat men rested for 2 hours in Lerwick and headed back for Stromness. And they were away for 36 hours, 230 nautical miles. Station secretaries were an essential part of the team, of course, and the man in the middle here, wearing his lum hat, George Linklater Thompson. He was a hoyman, but he had a draper shop in Stromness, and he was a very able and active lifeboat secretary for more than 30 years, from 1903 to 1944, and served the crew on several occasions. The picture shows him at Buckingham Palace, where he was awarded the MBE for his service. And his colleagues in the picture are on the left, on his right, it's George Swanson, skipper of the Sandola. And the man on the other side is Alec Dundas. He was a Stroma man, and he was on the Leith to Lerwick run. Now, the calls that stick in my mind, first rightly, we have the Strath-Elliot at Selwick and Hoy. And then there was followed by the Leicester City a little further west. But my Uncle Georgie, he witnessed the grounding of the Strath-Elliot, and you'll not see this recorded, written down anywhere, but you'd hear it now. He says, I was putting out the quay on a fine quiet morning about high water, and with no sea running, and watched the trawler coming down for the north. It's never turned. She just kept straight on into the pow of Selwick, slipped up the rocks and heeled over on her side. The man must have been sleeping on the wheel. Anyway, the crew stayed on board, thinking they might manage to refloat. And a severe gale blew up that night. Stromness lifeboat went out, but they couldn't get close enough to the boat. At one point, the lifeboat was totally swamped by a heavy sea, with only the funnel sticking above the water. It was a miracle that nobody was lost. They went down then to Longhope and got the rocket brigade up, took them up, and they got a line aboard and performed the longest breeches buoy rescue to that date. A night or two later, we had a repeat performance after the skipper with one of his crew and Charlie Ritchie Brebister had gone on board to salvage some of the gear and got trapped on board by another gale. Just 5 months later, we had in March 1953, the Leicester City ran ashore on Ootings. That's not a little bit further west than Selwick. It was in fair weather, but very dense thick fog, and a heavy land sea running, breaking on a very dangerous rocky shore. The men abandoned ship, and those who were lucky enough to make the shore suffered exposure and injury from the rocks. With the help of neighbours and the Longhope doctor, Mary Ritchie Brebister and her brother Charlie made strenuous efforts to save them, but they didn't all survive. William Sinclair and his men in the lifeboat saved 2 from the sea, but altogether 7 men lost their lives. And the Thurso lifeboat was also helping in the search. Now, Longhope. It opened in 1874 with a sail and oar boat, the Dickinson Edelson. I don't have a picture of her, but the one shown here in this picture was I'm trying to think of the description of it. She was a boat that was temporarily based there, and with coxswain Benjamin Stout and his crew used this boat to go to the aid of a trawler in the Firth. They got alongside in very heavy weather and evacuated all 22 of the crew. And Benjamin was awarded a silver medal for that. And some of the men saved were Germans, so the Kaiser gave him a gold watch and cash for Benjamin and his crew. The first motorboat was the KTJS, and one of her early missions was in 1930 when the trawler Bracken Moor ran ashore on the rocks at Torness. And strong tide and breaking water made it hard for coxswain John Swanson, that's him in the picture, to find a good position and anchor, and had hauled the men by line to the lifeboat. 8 of the crew were saved, but the skipper died with a suspected heart attack. For this rescue, John was awarded a silver medal. Did you not get that? That's John Swanson. And now we have some of the bigger ships that went ashore. The Swedish tanker Royal grounded in 1951. Fred Johnson and his crew attended in the Thomas McCunn. In severe weather conditions, they came alongside the wreck and recovered 24 of the crew. 15 stayed on board thinking they would save the ship. In poor weather conditions, the lifeboat attended 3 times in 2 days before the crew agreed to leave under instruction of the ship owner. Stromness was founded in 1909. It was a sail and oar boat, the John Ryburn. And there we see her. This is her naming ceremony, which took part in Kirkwall, which 1909, but still no motor. On February 19, 1912, she was called to assist the fishing boat Crimond, Aberdeen, ashore in the Holmes of Ayr to the north of Sandy. They set off about 2 in the morning on a difficult journey in a dirty black night of an ebb tide and a heavy sea running. Lack of lights to guide them added to the hazard. By the time they got there at 5 a.m., 4 men had already been lost. With great difficulty, they were able to manoeuvre into position, drop anchor, and haul the remaining 4 men to safety. It was still a long, cold haul back to Stromness. One survivor was unable to talk for some time, probably suffered from hypothermia. In October 1966, this is going forward a good bit now, the John Gilletly Hindman in Stromness got 2 calls on the same day. At 1:30 in the afternoon, they set off to help a Danish ship ashore in Shappensea in a northeasterly gale. They put a line aboard, and by 5 p.m. the free floated. No sooner did they get back to Stromness when the flares were sighted near the Red Head in 80, so they were off and searching again. This time, a vain attempt put down a false alarm. But they got back 11 p.m., a long, hard day's work. The Stromness men were all fishermen, and if they were at sea, it was difficult to muster a crew, and this was particularly hard during the war when many of the young men were away fighting. As a result, their station closed and moved to Kirkwall in 1872, and as far as I know, it was by amicable agreement. Dennis mentioned the Grace Patterson Ritchie. There she is in her later colour. She was grey originally. One of her notable rescues was when the Rousey clam dredger Benachie broke from her moorings and grounded on a stony beach to the east of Rousey Pier. The owner, Johnny Peace, and his crewman, Ivan Wishart from Stromness, boarded to try and get her off, but the wind rose from the southeast and it was soon blowing a gale, trapping them aboard. Coxswain Billy Sinclair and his crew set off at 10 o'clock in the morning, and for 10, with poor visibility and a blinding spray, and under very difficult stormy conditions, our line was passed and the lifeboat was able to pull her off and tow her to wire. Billy was awarded a bronze medal for his efficient operation, and his crew got the customary medal service certificates. I don't know why Billy's in here today. He thought he might come, but I was watching for him, but I didn't see him. He's a little bit older than me. And now we come to the loss of the TGB. The Grace Patterson Ritchie was under assessment at Kirkwall for a few years before we established the station there. And she attended when the Irene was driven ashore on the east side of Stromness in 1969. She was under command. That's the Irene. The lifeboat was under command of a relief coxswain, but the second coxswain, Billy Sinclair, was the man with the local knowledge that night. They stood by as the rocket brigade from DNS assisted the Stromness team to get the crew off by Breach's Buoy. And we all know it turned out to be a disaster tonight for Long Hope when their boat capsized by a monstrous sea in the Firth. Lan Kirkpatrick, three-time silver medalist and the recent star of Eamon Andrews' TV show, This Is Your Life, was lost together with his crew, and the families were devastated. The whole country shared their grief. 4 lifeboats joined the search the following day: Stromness, Stronsey, Thurrow, and the Grace Patrick Ritchie. The Thurrow boat eventually found the casualty and towed her into Scarborough. It was a very sad time. The close-knit community along Hope stood firmly together, though. The RNLI was in their blood. It took them a little time to get up and going again, so Grace Patrick Ritchie was stationed at Scapa as an interim measure until Long Hope was re-established and the Kirkwall Lifeboat Station opened in 1972. A lot of water run under the bridge since then, and now the Lifeboat Institution has reached its bicentenary, not without the support of the wives, families, and lifeboat girls, whose dedication makes it all possible. And I'm going to leave you now with a picture of another notable scene. It's the 150th anniversary of the Stromness lifeboat, and they did RNLI in Orkney in 2017. Thank you.
Very, very enlightening. If you've got any questions for these two gentlemen, please put your hand up and we will get a roving mic to you so you can ask one. I've got a question in the meantime. Out with the war years, has it always been easy to recruit skilled and willing volunteers to crew the lifeboats?
As far as I know, it's always been easy. Apart from obviously the difficulties in Stronsey because of the smaller population, I suppose. But there's been no shortage of people to come forward.
And how do they keep their? I mean, I know modern times they must have structured training and things, but how was it done in the
Well,
past?
I was hoping there might be a lifeboat man sitting down the front here that would tell me.
Graham.
Is Bobby Hall in here somewhere? No. Is there a lifeboat man in here somewhere? There's somebody up there that might answer the question.
Yes, as regards training, it's a very structured training program. By the way, I'm Chris Irwin. I used to be the lifeboat operations manager here in Kirkwall. I'm still involved with the lifeboat as a lifeboat launching authority. Yes, the training is very thorough. Everybody has to be trained before they even go on the boat. And these days, the training is done, very structured. Whether you're a navigator or an engineer, then you can go down any path you want, or even both. We have some people that are trained coxswains and mechanics. So, but every crewman has to do a minimum of 12 exercises every year, and that's on top of any shouts that they go out on.
Thank you. Do any more?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the construction of the boats, actually. The earlier boats, they were building tunnels for the propellers to provide safety. Was that in terms of if the people were in the water, it would keep them away from the propellers? But I wanted to ask how that compared with the pump jets on the fastest boats that were shown.
Sorry, what was the exact question? Sorry.
Aye, so your drawings showed propellers in tunnels, and you then said the last boat had a pump jet, and I wondered how they compared in terms of what the features for safety were for people in the water. Like, can you get pulled into a pump jet and squirted through as like mince, or I don't know how they work?
No, well, they generally have a grating on the inlet, so it wouldn't be possible for for a whole body to go in. But they're also they're well under the boat. They're not they're under the stern of the vessel, so you would need to be completely underneath the vessel if a finger or something was dragged in. But I mean, the propeller within the tunnel on a water jet is quite a distance from where the entry is. I think it would be fairly unlikely. I mean, the tunnels on the earlier boats, the wooden boats, I think they were mainly to provide protection for from grounding, damage to the propellers and the shafts if the vessel was working in shoal water, rather than for protection of people, people on board the boat falling in, or people in the water. It was mainly for the protection of the machinery and the safe operation of that, rather than the people in the water. Obviously, it did help that way as well, but my understanding is it was probably more for protecting the machinery and the propulsion machinery when the boat was operating in close to shore.
Okay, thanks. So is the pump jet safer in terms of protecting the machinery than a propeller itself? Like if you've got a pump jet, if it grounds, is that less likely to get damaged?
Yeah, well, the Shannon class, they actually show them driving onto a beach, so they can the boat is actually in an emergency, the boat could drive onto a beach, so it protects the propulsion machinery is completely protected. The only thing that's slightly vulnerable is they've got a bucket arrangement at the stern, which well, there's usually some sort of guard system around that, so that if you went astern into something, that protects that part.
I was going to ask, is the original design and operation of British lifeboats, was that done in isolation, or were there similar vessels and services in existence in other countries they could maybe tap into?
I think it's generally been done in isolation. I mean, I did go to a talk by one of the technical managers from Poole on I think it was the Shannon class boat, and they did sort of say there was some sort of cooperation, European cooperation, but I think I mean, the RNLI designed their own, well, they basically designed their own boats now. Maybe with, they obviously take on board any advances that are made in other countries. Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience?
Hi. As a landlubber, you use the expression a heavy land sea running, which I have heard on many occasions. What exactly is a heavy land sea?
I didn't quite hear what you're saying, but you're talking about land sea. Land sea is when there's a big swell coming in from the ocean. There may be a storm a long distance out in the Atlantic, and it sends out a big swell around it. So when that comes in and breaks on the shore, it's very dangerous conditions on what can be a real nice day. That's a land sea.
I've got one final one from myself, which is again in days gone by. How did lifeboat crews navigate in poor weather? How did they find the target? Right, bad weather, without modern navigation equipment.
Very difficult. The eye, with timing, looking at the watch, and having local knowledge, of course.
Hmm.
Even when the conditions might not be good and the visibility may not can be good, you can tell by where it's in the tide or out of the tide by looking over the side, you know.
You can.
And then of course sometimes you're literally looking over the side to see if they see the bottom. And in that respect, Bill Johnston, when he was interviewed about it later, he says he about that particular rescue of the Carmania, he said, "We're fair to nothing above the water," he says, "but I don't like to see the red ware churning up alongside of us," which I'm sure it did on that day.
Yeah, okay, if we any more questions, I can still take one more. We've got enough time for one. But if not, I am going to wrap this up. Now, if you've got any questions and you want to maybe have a chat with Len and Dennis, we're opening up the Green Air room up on the top right of you as you're looking. And you can go in there. There's a pop-up cafe with a wee honesty box if you want to use that. But please do go up and have a chat. I'm sure these lads will be quite happy to have a good long chat with you. Regarding the festival, the next event in the Phoenix Cinema starts shortly at 3:30 p.m, where we have Dr. Alan Walker in an event called Kelvin and the Cables, and it describes the laying of the first successful transatlantic cable. Before you leave, could you please fill in a feedback form? Now, you can either do that with pen and pencil, or again, you can click on the QR code, and that will take you to an online version, of which I have actually done, and it's quite easy to fill in. Good motivation here. If you complete it, you'll be entered into a draw for £100 worth of Northlink ferry vouchers, so might be in your interest. Anyway, Len and Dennis, thank you once again for another inspirational look at seafaring and the bravery of the volunteers that go help and rescue people. Absolutely vital. So once again, can I ask the audience to thank Len and Dennis, please?